with all
evening,
the
Catherine.
tidbits from social media
Absolutely.
and across media outlets. We're starting off now with Vladimir Putin's opinion piece in the New York Times. It's not often he does those,
No.
if ever. It's given rise to lots of reaction and, of course, some satire, hasn't it?
That's right. A lot of people, tongue-in-cheek remarks, Catherine. A plea for caution from Russia. This was in yesterday's, Thursday's edition of the New York Times, and it's generated huge comment in the US and beyond. Some in essentially what he was saying is, look, you know, he referred to God, which actually apparently in Russian political discourse you never do. So it was very much intended for an American audience. And he said, you know, God creates all countries, all people equal. So you can't really speak of a country that has a particular calling for protecting the world, etc., etc. So sort of scolding the US for its role as kind of global policeman, I suppose, on occasion. I almost wanted to vomit when I read Vladimir Putin's op-ed, said one senator from New Jersey, that's Bob Menendez. John Stewart, meanwhile, reacted in the last 24 hours as well, calling Vladimir Putin the Larry David of international diplomacy.
What does he mean by that, James?
What he essentially said is often Larry David, who is that bumbling sort of comic, what would you say, TV character in the US, he will add something on. Just when something's going okay, he'll say,
don't say anything else.
Just one
leave
more
it.
thing.
Yeah.
And then he ruins everything, right?
Okay.
And in other words, things were sort of, you know, moving slowly towards some sort of an accord earlier this week, and then Vladimir had to come along and say, oh, by the way, right? So they were...
Just can't stop himself.
Right. Meanwhile, a former Ronald Reagan defense advisor said on Fox News earlier this week that she thought Vladimir Putin should get the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, I suppose if it has gone to Obama, you could argue heads of state, etc. Although there is that little issue of, you know, the Chechen War, for example. And indeed, coincidence would have it that the last time Vladimir Putin penned an op-ed or an opinion piece for the New York Times was in 1999, arguing for war in Chechnya. So I think if...
Perhaps not the Nobel Prize, you said, but it could happen. Is this, though, a Republican dig at Obama, though?
I think it might be more than anything else. I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's the senator in question. Now, over in the Times of London, 24 hours after the opinion piece in the Times of New York, there was this piece by Edward Lucas, "You Westerners are idiots, you believed me." It's a satirical piece penned by Edward Lucas, aka Vladimir Putin, for the purpose of this article. A message from Vladimir Putin: "I've humiliated Obama, undermined Europe's leaders. My plan is working. Dividing Europe within Europe, dividing Europe from America, etc., etc., etc." So this is sort of Edward Lucas's attempt to strip back the rhetoric in the New York Times piece and expose it for what he thinks Vladimir is actually, you know, trying to do.
The unofficial version, of course, we have to point out, yeah.
Now, moving to Bashar al-Assad and his communication strategy, we all know about the piece he wrote last week, Catherine, for Le Figaro. He was interviewed by Le Figaro, and it created a lot of waves, as they say, and created a lot of reaction in France. A lot of people unhappy about it, in particular in government circles, as the White House was unhappy with this interview by the New York Times of Vladimir Putin. In any case, Atlantico, which is a right-leaning website in France, says Bashar al-Assad has won the communications war. Speaking to Le Figaro, speaking to CBS, Charlie Rose in the US. And how has he won the war? By actually being very careful about what he says and who he says it to. He doesn't have the rhetoric of a dictator or kind of a dangerous dictator as Gaddafi might have had or as Saddam Hussein might have had.
He tries to sound very measured and tries
Absolutely.
to come across as a well-spoken, measured man.
That's right.
He?
And if they're trying to cast him as a sort of a Hitler-esque character, as some in the US have, and then he appears on Charlie Rose sounding very normal, really, he certainly is doing a good job with his communications, whatever about what's behind the communications. Speaking of, Alistair Campbell, former spin doctor at number 10 Downing Street.
The terror of many journalists in Westminster during his time
Absolutely.
At the number 10 press office.
He revealed, Catherine, in The Independent in the UK earlier this week, that he was approached by a middleman. The Syrians apparently were asking him to do some communications for him. He said
knock
no.
a few heads together there.
Right.
Goodness, I'm sure he'd have his work cut out for him.
He said
no. Okay. Right. We're moving on to one of our perennial favourites here on Media Watch. That's former French President Nicolas Sarkozy. And there's still talk that he might be back and he might come back for the 2017 presidential election.
That's right. Look at this football jersey that he's now wearing. It went up on the Friends of Nicolas Sarkozy Facebook page. NS Revient. Come back, Nicolas Sarkozy 2017. Can we have a look at that jersey? There it is, and that's gone up on Facebook. One person who doesn't think he's going to come back is Marine Le Pen, the head of the far-right National Front Party, she said if within the next 2 months he's not taken off in handcuffs, it'll be a miracle. He is embroiled in a few cases which could prevent that comeback, which he and his fans want.
I just want to know who ordered that T-shirt for him.
The Nicolas Sarkozy Revient Association.
Okay, good. Well, there you go. They've been working hard.
Right.
Thanks very much indeed
Thanks,
to James Creedon there with Media Watch for us. Well, coming up next, it's time for the very latest business news.